Next hour, let's talk about bioelectromagnetic healing, how that works.
Okay.
I'm testing a machine now that the folks from the Merlin Project sent me, and before I talk about anything, I want to see if it works, or I don't want to talk about it. And then we've got Tesla. I want to talk about who I think we have harnessed some kind of weapon from Tesla technology, don't you?
Oh, yes, of course. Many of these things can be weaponized. But I'd like to concentrate on the peaceful, beneficial applications.
All right. Stay with us. Dr. Thomas Vallone. More to come on Coast to Coast AM. Thomas, we'll talk a little bit about Nikola Tesla, and then we'll get into bioelectromagnetic healing as well. Tell me about your fascination with Tesla.
Oh, Tesla is a real hero of mine, and in fact, one of the interesting quotes that he has is that someday we'll have to stop using fuel for the sake of our future generations. And if we use fuel for our power, we're living on capital, exhausting it. The method is barbarous and wantonly wasteful. So he really had some profound statements that even to this day have rung true. And he also predicted zero-point energy, which I find also very amazing. He measured the Earth's Schumann resonance, which is called Schumann because in 1950s, Schumann actually measured the 8 cycles per second resonant frequency of the Earth. It just happens to be the same frequency of our brain when it goes into alpha rhythm. No small coincidence. We've evolved into that Earth electromagnetic field as well. But also, what's interesting is that Tesla worked on the wireless transmission of power. Our institute had a Tesla conference in 2003 commemorating the 1903 Wardenclyffe Tower building that was supposed to and still can project power level electromagnetics fields throughout the world.
This was sending out free energy, basically, wasn't it?
Well, no, and that is a common misconception.
Really? Okay, how so?
People have elevated Tesla to the point of the free energy conception, and I have to lower his image a little bit because we're still talking about grid energy powering that Tesla coil that's in the Wardenclyffe Tower. And at the 2003 conference, the Tesla conference that we had, it was Jim Corum, Dr. Jim Corum, Professor Emeritus from the University of West Virginia, that explained, who I had seen several times at Tesla conferences explaining the fundamental nature of that pulsing of the Earth ionosphere cavity and how it's over 95% efficient. Because you're resonating with what the Earth likes to see rather than 60 cycles, a transverse wave. This is a longitudinal type wave. So it's still being powered by some standard source, which hopefully is solar energy or at least something that's fuelless. But the important part is it compares very favorably to what we use now. And keep in mind that it was good old J.P. Morgan that said, well, I can't put a meter on it, so I'm not going to fund it, when Tesla went back to ask for more money to finish the Wardenclyffe Tower. But see, today's transmission is really very inefficient. We're now losing 2/3 of all the electricity that we
generate.
That we generate, and this is gigawatts. The atmosphere contains it, and this is another area that certainly if we're including atmospheric electricity and also the Earth magnetic energy, which Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher contributed to my book, Harnessing the Wheelwork of Nature.
That tower was, what, a little less than 200 feet?
Yes, 187 feet, I believe it is. But what I was going to say, at least in favor of what you just said, was that Rauscher believes that there is enough atmospheric and magnetic energy to would you say, supplement the transmission through the Earth ionosphere cavity. So the ringing of the Earth would basically accentuate that release of energy. So there are, I would say, people on both sides of the fence, whether we're going to get free energy out of it or not. But I try to take a conservative attitude to a lot of these theories and at least look for the provable parts that are worth promoting. And certainly that the wireless transmission is a much more favorable one, and it's where we're already evolving. I mean, cell phones have become really popular. There's all kinds of wireless things now that we're looking forward to stop having that umbilical cord. You know, J.P. Morgan forced us to have an umbilical cord on our homes and on every appliance that we use, just so he could collect money from us.
Do you believe that when Tesla was testing the tower, that he may have created that explosion over Siberia in Tunguska?
No, actually, I don't, and I've seen.
Some people have said that, though.
Oh, absolutely. No. There's quite a bit of proof of the fact that it probably was a comet, or at least a meteor that came in at a glancing angle, because you've got such a spread of the trees that fell in a butterfly pattern that we can't attribute it to just a random explosion. This was definitely a very, a glancing angle into the atmosphere with a big enough projectile that it survived and then exploded in the lower atmosphere. But Tesla still was working on the death ray and many other things too, so you can give him credit for some of those destructive tendencies. But of course, he also did venture into the electromagnetic therapy area. And this is what George Van Tassel was interested in, and also even therapy-wise, many doctors, like Dr. Tusi, for example. In fact, you may not know that as we get into the electromagnetic area, the American Electrotherapeutic Association held yearly conferences around the turn of the century.
Well, I got to tell you, he was a genius. How would you compare him to Thomas Edison?
Well, it's like AC
they were rivals, weren't they?
Yep. It's AC versus DC, and the wars. There's books on the AC/DC wars, and that literally was what Edison rose the confrontation to. It was a battle, legal battle. I mean, Edison went to the extent of the Pan American Exposition of stopping Tesla and Westinghouse from using Edison's light bulb. And so Tesla, in a matter of months, had to reinvent the incandescent light bulb to be able to use hundreds of them, maybe thousands, at the Pan American Exposition. So Edison was brutal. Even when it came to winning the distribution rights for Niagara Falls, right where I grew up, you see that Tesla was still getting the glory, and Edison felt slighted. So what happened to his New York lab while Tesla's in Niagara Falls? New York lab starts on fire for no good reason. So it's a very questionable fire, and especially at that moment when the Edison and GE were basically suffering from the lack of popularity. The direct current can't go very far, and even to this day we can't transmit direct current. So until we have superconductive wires, which someday we will at room temperature, we still have to rely upon alternating current.
Now, when Tesla died, is it true that his office or his home was raided and all his papers were taken?
Yes, I have to agree that that's true. And the FBI had a file on him. You can actually request the FBI file. It's been mostly declassified now.
Who do you think raided his home or office?
Well, most biographies describe the fact that the FBI was there very quickly. And this is unfortunate because a lot of his materials were very interesting. In the back of my Harnessing the Wheelwork of Nature book, I actually have some of the FBI documents on Tesla. And it's interesting because as you look through the pages, many of them are redacted, with black marks on them.
Well, I guess it was legitimately national security, wasn't it, when he died?
Yeah.
I mean, if his plans and notes had gotten into the wrong hands, it could have been a disaster.
Well, that's what the FBI believed at the time, and really some of these documents describe, they're internal FBI documents. Some of them describing the standing scientists in the electric field, and Tesla's at the highest one, and conducted many experiments, intensely disliked, and so they had a lot of controversial remarks about Tesla, and also the importance of preserving his technology. Well,
and then again, one could say that they also thought that they didn't want anybody to be able to develop free or low-cost energy. So they decided to bury the plans.
Well, yes, and in fact, I'm looking at one of the documents on page 298 of my book, and it's from Mr. Karen. It's to Clarence Kelly, who was the director of FBI, and at the very bottom of this letter, it describes the fact that at any rate there are 3 possible military applications of Tesla's technologies. So they kept that classified, and many others describing what the applications could be. But as I say, I really like to turn the conversations like this to things that are favorable, people can use, and
I agree.
Yeah, and not get too much worried about what the government's been doing over the past 50 years.
Yeah, but you got to do it with that kind of an eye as well. I mean, we can't be naive about the fact that there are groups out there that just want to continue to put us down and profit and manipulate. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've got these high oil prices right now. If we had this kind of technology available, or the 0 point that you talked about last hour, we wouldn't have the problems we have today.
Well, that's absolutely true. And in fact, I went to the Library of Congress to view the first national energy plan back in 1976 or so, and it was fascinating to see how they described the solution of the oil dependency, which we had back then, right after the oil embargo, and many of those plans were implemented with good congressional appropriations, but then, of course, Reagan stopped many of them, including the biofuel or the synfuel project that was started. But we were the first ones to invent the Sandia Labs, I believe it was, the concentrated solar. And then, of course, other parts of the world became the recipients of that technology because we didn't follow through with it to actually use it. So we've had our chance. We've really had our chance to become independent, energy independent, and instead, big business has been lobbying Congress for decades very successfully because they have lots of money to do so, and congressional people are very receptive to lots of favors, and of course that's how Washington D.C. runs. When you pat on the back, it gets another favor later down the road. And we've seen it in the past 8 years of our administration, which I don't want to get too much into politics, but it's time for a change. And, of course, we're looking forward to the fact that maybe we'll see a solution to the problem because there's a lot of motivation now since we're in the spotlight.
If you were the energy czar, you had a blank check, what would you do? What kind of changes would you implement?
Oh, we definitely would start to implement alternative energy, conventional alternative energy implementation immediately. The standard portfolio of renewables is barely 10% in a handful of states across the nation, and the rest of the world is 20% renewables in their energy portfolio. So to be a leader, the United States should pick 30% as a goal, and then at least have a implementation state by state to the 20% region that'll let us catch up to the rest of the world. But see, for example, wind energy and even solar has depended upon government subsidies to really be competitive as their technology becomes more efficient. And solar is becoming more efficient. I have one of the Future Energy News proving that there's 4 major breakthroughs that solar has created.
Well, the panels are getting cheaper too, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Plus, they're getting more powerful.
Yes.
One of the renewable labs have discovered that there's a technique to produce 4 electrons for every single photon that comes in. Normally, it's 1 to 1. And now they have 4 times that in some of their experiments.
Richard Hoagland was telling us about a solar coating that they've got out there now they're working on.
Yep, and in fact, Canarca is probably one of the best companies to look at because not only is their solar panel flexible and thin, but it also works on ambient temperature. In other words, thermal heat rather than just light. So, yeah, we've got a great future in solar that really the government can help amplify and really ramp up in terms of production. If an energy czar was future-focused, in making the transition from where we used to be in the 19th century to the 20th century, and now we're really in the 21st century, which, as a kid, I always believed we'd be flying around in anti-gravity hovercraft and flying out in space. And,
the Jetsons, they're
yeah,
here,
exactly.
right?
You know, you've heard many movie stars talk about that. I heard him on David Letterman, and I agree, because I'm a baby boomer as well. And yet the future has not arrived for us, and we feel slighted. And, of course, we know who to blame, but it still doesn't make it any better. But to tell you the truth, we're really making progress in what looks like not only a future energy that is fuel-free, fossil fuel-free, but also electrotherapy that revives what was known 100 years ago due to Tesla's technology. And I think we're going to see a very nice blending of that, so that, for example, even when we help foreign countries like Africa and India and other places, instead of sending pharmaceuticals every month to keep their treatment center going, all you need is a few electrotherapy devices installed once, and as long as they have a solar panel to power it, they've got therapy treatments for years to come. I mean, biocharger.net is a good website to go to. They have their AIDS study right on the homepage. I know Jim Girard, the inventor, and many other Tesla-type devices that have high voltage and noble gas tubes that were invented 100 years ago have copied the Jim Girard biocharger. And the therapy results are very, very promising, very noticeable. And studies have proven them.
What do you think the best gift is that Tesla gave us?
Well, it has to be the AC. Alternating current is the best gift he gave us. And when he tore up the check that Westinghouse and tore up the agreement that Westinghouse gave him, it was really a guarantee that Westinghouse would continue with the generators and motors that Tesla designed. I mean, there's dozens of patents that Tesla developed, and yet the amount of money he got was so small, I've forgotten how much it was.
We are lucky we got him, though, aren't we?
Absolutely. Our society would never be the same if Edison had his way. We'd still be in the dark ages. And electricity and lights, see, the fact we take indoor lighting for granted now is due to Tesla. Because without AC, we'd be still trying to power it from DC on our local neighborhood generator, because it's not going to go over a couple miles. I mean, I lived in Buffalo, New York, and Buffalo was the first city in the world to get electricity from 25 miles away back in 1895.
And that must have seemed incredible at the time.
Well, not only was it incredible, but do you believe that the mayor of Buffalo decided to turn the switch on after midnight because he didn't think it was going to work?
I love it.
That's a true story.
Was he surprised?
Absolutely. Yep.
Tom, tell me a little bit about your personal work. What do you do here? What are you working on next?
Well, the bioelectromagnetic area to me is a fascinating area. I've invented a couple different Tesla coils in a box style therapy units. Our Premier Junior is a favorite because it's only a few $100s, but it's the kind of thing that you can use on a daily basis, or if you have a momentary ailment or pain or something. Anecdotally, this is the kind of thing people tell you, and it's fun to see that, for example, one of the things I say in my bioelectromagnetic healing book, and I tell in every lecture I've given, is that electrons are antioxidants. And I pause to let that sink in, because most people don't even know it. You know, you can be feeding free radicals all the time when you take a shower, and this is literally what people do, letting chlorine bathe on their body. And yet if you look in the organic textbooks, which I have, it says that chlorine Cl2 will dissociate at body temperatures. And so you've got a chlorine ion that's going to replicate 10,000 times. Just that one ion. And, of course, lots of them are coming out of the faucet from your local water company.
Or in our swimming pools and whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah. So a shower filter is a very important thing to have an anti-aging effect. And, see, that's the benefit of it. If you get into taking antioxidants by pills, or if you use electrotherapy to get the electrons directly, either way, it's an anti-aging effect. Also, it boosts the transmembrane potential of every cell. Our cells right now are used to having 100,000 volts per centimeter across the cell membrane, or 1,000,000 volts per meter. That's the same electric gradient that the body isn't naturally used to.
Well, let's talk about the bioelectric magnetic healing principles when we come back with Dr. Thomas Vallone. I'm George Norrie. This is Coast to Coast AM. Hey, next hour, we'll open up the phone lines. Absolutely fascinating information with Dr. Thomas Vallone. Up next, there are many bioelectric magnetic devices reemerging in the 21st century based on high-voltage Tesla coils that apparently bring beneficial health improvements to humans. We'll talk with Dr. Tom about this next on Coast to Coast AM. Tom, bioelectromagnetic healing, very important. I've been a long-term believer in this. Give me an overall view, first of all. What is electromagnetic medicine?
Electromagnetic medicine is the use of electrical devices to affect healing in the body, and specifically to transfer electrons and magnetic fields right into the tissue. And in my book, I have graphs and charts and analysis to show how much it penetrates. Magnetic fields, for example, penetrate throughout the entire body, whereas electric fields will tend to penetrate through maybe the skin area and can go a little bit deeper if you have high voltage. But there's lots of ways to do it. You can have static fields, there are people that like static magnets, just permanent magnets, and magnetic therapy is very popular. That's a form of electromagnetic therapy. And, of course, you can also have alternating magnetic fields. Some people ask about the power line magnetic field. Well, that's how I got started. Back in 1987, there was a power line magnetic field study in New York State. And so I developed a meter to measure those magnetic fields. In fact, Integrity Design Company actually still carries those products. And the interesting thing is the bottom line to those questions about the fear of effects of it and the interest in the benefits is simple. It's like if you take too much of a good thing, you can have a negative reaction. Too much selenium, zinc, vitamin A can have a toxic effect, but in small quantities, it's very beneficial. So with all these therapies, even though we were talking high voltage and various frequencies, there's the bottom line is that for short-term effect, short-term exposure, it actually does stimulate the body in many beneficial ways, including the immune system.
You know, we've always heard that buzzing if you walk under a huge power line. You know, you hear that hum sound.
Right.
That can't be too healthy for you.
Well, for short term, it is. It actually does stimulate the currents in the body and gets the cells to actually exchange calcium and nutrients across the cell membrane. It's literally causing them and opening the pores of the cell membranes. But see, if it's chronic, I used to do surveys of homes, and every so often you see the main power line to the home actually going through the bedroom area on the outside of the wall of places where people sleep. And then they're exposed to it 8 hours a day, which is getting into the chronic exposure area. But there are levels of exposure, and what's nice about electrotherapy is that it's designed very carefully to meet FDA standards. I know several companies that are now applying for FDA approval for example, a high voltage device. In fact, I think the Vibe machine is now applying for it, and other companies have as well. So the FDA is coming around to the fact that when it's designed safely, you can actually use it for 5 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, and go away for several days and notice after effects that are very helpful.
Do you remember the work of Willem Reich?
Yes, but our Bryce is actually even more popular in this area. But Reich is controversial, and I certainly can compare both of them if you like.
Well, one was which one was into the Argon?
That's Reich. Yeah,
okay.
Reich.
Okay. And the other one was into machinery, wasn't he?
Yeah, Royal Raymond Reich was developing and did develop the ability of using high voltage, but also with a gas tube. Initially, he worked with ultraviolet to kill bacteria and viruses in the body. But it combined the light and the electricity together, electromagnetic fields with light exposure of noble gases. And Reich's machines are still popular today for that reason. And Rife's story, actually, there's a company that sells the DVDs describing Rife's life, and it's a very sad type of story because it was a controversial confrontation between the FDA, the AMA, and of course Rife was curing cancer left and right. He even had a university doctor who actually used his machine to actually treat cancer patients and then wrote books about it. So this became a real problem for those who wanted to see pharmaceuticals become very popular.
See, that's what I was going to say, Tom. They get these people with technology, assuming it works, they get squeezed out by the big guys, don't they?
Absolutely. And that's why the lawyers and various marketers have to be very careful to protect the product, to know how to distribute it properly, and to get the common people interested in it so it's affordable as well.
Did Edgar Cayce ever talk about electromagnetic healing?
I can't say that he did. I'm not sure.
What is radionics?
Oh, well, radionics is another branch, I would say, a spin-off area, and actually the U.S. Psychotronics Association is probably the most visible area that promotes radionics and still has annual conferences dealing with it. Psychotronics.org is the website for that. But radionics is not associated with electromagnetics, but it's a device that uses what I could call a simulated circuit that's adjustable by the user, but it's operator dependent, and it's really designed to amplify your intention. So it gets into that area of psychic healing and spiritual healing. That it's very interesting when you find an operator that really knows how to use it, because they can analyze and they can treat, and of course they've had FDA conversations for decades too. But it luckily has become a little bit less as long as they have lots of disclaimers.
All right, this information based on the Tesla coils. Tell us, how does it work? What happens to the body?
Well, specifically when you're sitting next to a high-voltage Tesla coil that's 100,000 volts or higher, and that's the way they're designed to be treated. Within a few feet of the Tesla coil, you basically bathed in the plasma flow of electrons, and you're also I have to cite Tesla in the fact that Tesla described human tissue as being like condensers. And condensers are the old word for capacitors. So he recognized that the tissue behaved as if it could store charge. Electrons have some place to park itself within the human body. And that's exactly what happens near high voltage. The human tissues get charged up. The transmembrane potential, as I mentioned, likes to see 1,000,000 volts per meter across its membrane. Well, if you have a disease or a health challenge, it's going to start lowering, because electric gradients and chemical gradients are the only two ways that the body stores energy. And that's right from the biophysics textbook. So when you're exposed to the high voltage, you come away feeling energized. That's, I would say, the first subjective common experience. And I even designed a chair that has a high-voltage device underneath it, and then it's connected to the seat and the hands. And I called it an electric chair.
I was going to say.
But the people convinced me, no, it can't. You have to change the name, so we call it an energy chair. And I debuted it at the Whole Person Healing Conference a couple of years ago, and had people sitting on it and really remarking how surprisingly well it worked, because you contact it through a very insulating static mat material, but you're also getting the high voltage potential charging up the whole body. And you can light a neon light bulb with your hand. It's the proof that it's working, and just like Tesla did.
Well, but like an electric chair, Tom, if you get too much power, too much voltage, it can kill you.
And too much current. Well,
yeah,
really
you think of the movie The Red Mile, the Green Mile,
right?
And that one scene I'll always remember where they didn't put the wet sponge on his head; it was a dry sponge.
Oh,
I'm not going to get into the graphic of it,
details.
but too much power is not a good thing, right?
Well, that's like the joke they tell about lasers. You've heard it, right? The laser device is the same thing that tanks use to destroy machinery and enemies, and dentists use, and eye treaters, eye doctors use to treat the eye. But of course, the eye doctor has to remember to change the controls from tank to eyeball.
Oh, my God. Yeah, he better. See, now you're going to scare the heck out of everybody going to see their ophthalmologist tomorrow.
So you have both sides of the fence on every one of these devices.
All right, this bombardment of photons and electrons into the biological tissue, how quickly does it work?
Well, the interesting thing is, and this is really from a lot of the top doctors in the field, just light exposure, and that's in my book, Bioelectromagnetic Healing, a whole chapter just on light exposure and the benefits of light therapy. The skin of the body loves to absorb light, and the reason is that the DNA gets charged up by light. And people don't know that if you take a sun bath for 15 minutes once a week, or even once a month, you're doing your entire immune system a huge favor.
Right.
Because the body itself, every cell, every DNA in the cell nucleus wants to send out and does send out what are called biophotons.
Yeah, too much sun is not a good thing.
Exactly. There's a good comparison of what we're talking about. So the small exposure, less than an hour for a day or something, once a week, is really what all your immune system needs. But see, a lot of us live in the dark, inside buildings all the time. And especially if you live in a condo or high-rise, it's hard to get outside to get sun and take a shirt off, for example, or your, whatever else. And, of course, the more exposure you get, the better, because the skin tissue needs that. And, of course, ultraviolet kills the germs on the contact. It builds vitamin D in the body, strengthens your bones. But what I cite in the book is the fact that biophotons are the body's instant communication system. And
why do people look healthier with suntans?
Well, the melanin is activated. You've got a whole host of benefits from exposure to light. So these advanced devices like the biocharger I was describing, and the Vibe machine and others, really use the combination of noble gas bulbs to get various frequencies that are very specific, and the high voltage to accentuate the penetration of the electrons. And so it's a synergistic effect between them.
Let's talk about magnetics for a moment. People can buy magnets at a drugstore now, and you wear them like you would a Band-Aid.
Right.
Do those little tiny things work?
Oh, absolutely. I can't say, specifically the areas, because I'm not a doctor and I don't make health claims. I have to disclaim that. But anecdotally, you find plenty of people that swear by them, sports authorities and so forth. And the bottom line, if people are looking for a scientific reason, one of the simplest ones is that we can connect to the flow of blood, for example, as an electrofluid in the body. And so when you put a magnet near it, it's going to affect and move the flow of electrons and electrolytes throughout the body. So there's a physical reason why magnets should have an effect. If you remember the book Body Electric?
Body Electric,
by
yes.
Dr. Robert Becker. I heard a wonderful doctor say this one book was the best contribution to starting the field of bioelectromagnetics. Robert Becker did us a great service, because in that book he has so many seminal experiments that he performed that even today a lot of us refer back to that for the information it contains. But he describes the fact that a strong magnet, say near a nerve, can actually anesthetize a person, because it would diffuse or deflect the neuron pulses.
What about side effects?
Well, from a static magnet, it's hard to say, because not enough studies have been done. But the Nikon company, for example, I know they have lots of studies they cite, and I haven't followed the static magnetic field and the static electric field research that much, because it turns out, and the studies are in my book, Bioelectromagnetic Healing, because when you pulse it in either of those fields, you get 10 times the benefit. See, the body will tend to acclimate to any type of continuous exposure. It'll build its defenses to try to maintain homeostasis. But if you have a very short pulse or a very rapid changing pulse, then you've got something the body can't adapt to, and therefore the energy gets in. And I've got a wonderful story to prove it.
I was just going to ask you. Give me a great story with this.
Okay. Dr. Glenn Gordon, an elderly doctor in his 70s, was one of our speakers just at the last conference on future energy. And his DVD is available. This was just in 2006. And his company, it's em-probe.com. And the reason I promote it is that this is a doctor who is scheduled for a heart transplant. I mean, can you imagine a medical doctor with the ultimate insult that he's got to go under the knife himself?
Yeah.
Well, that was his state. He had chronic congestive heart failure. And he knew the whole history of bioelectromagnetics. So he decided that he wanted to do something about it himself. And so he recognized just what I was talking about, the pulsed electromagnetic field, very beneficial, and he now has been writing articles to describe all these details. But put a long story short, what does he do? He designs a small handheld device that fits in his shirt pocket. And the M probe that he designed was either battery-powered or whatever, but it put out what he calls the fastest nanosecond pulse in the business. And even had a NASA fellow help him with the design, and NASA actually has a study that shows the benefits of nanosecond pulsing. So what happened was his heart started to get better. He was moving fluids with the changing magnetic field. And that's exactly what you expect with an electrolyte exposure to a magnetic field. And he was able to walk a few feet, 10 feet, 100 feet. He finally was able to run and at a jogging pace. And then he decided to bike. And he started biking so much distance, he said, I'm going to bike across country. And this, to me, was amazing, but he stopped at radio stations and TV stations along the way to tell the story. And so he biked across country. And now he lived to tell about it because he cured himself and he never needed the heart transplant.
Would you use this yourself?
Oh, we do. We even sell it. And it's only a few $100s. That's the interesting thing is he designed it cheaply, inexpensively, and he's got his own testimonial to prove that it works. And he's publishing journal articles now in major medical journals to explain why the body's tissue in biological terminology is actually, an electrical device that we're working with.
Are we going to get a National Institute of Health or Health Institute study on this at all?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because actually I've followed the National Foundation for Alternative Medicine for years now, and they've changed directors many times, executive directors, but it was founded by a congressman. And they are the ones, the National Foundation for Alternative Medicine, NFAM, it's called nfam.org. They actually do promote studies, but see, over the years, they've had to do them overseas. Because where can you get an electrotherapy device tested and not have problems with whatever place is doing the testing? But overseas, they've had no problems at all, and the studies have gone on consistently for years. So any device they get, they're able to normally arrange for studies to be done.
Well, I've been a longtime believer in its ability. I just never really understood how it worked. And, it works. It also tells me, not to get too biblical here, but, when Jesus would use, light and electromagnetic pulses around his body, he'd heal people.
That's a good point. And even you can go one step further and describe the radiance that saints supposedly have. Well, it can be explained through biophoton radiation.
Absolutely.
Very, very possible because we already do radiate in infrared and getting into the visible because you can visibly see a person. So, the cells react that way too.
All right, Tom, we're going to take phone calls next with you when we come right back on Coast to Coast AM. 0 Point Energy, reverse engineered UFO technology, bioelectromagnetic healing, Tesla. Those are just some of the things we can talk with Dr. Tom Vallone about in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Okay, welcome back. Dr. Tom Vallone, our guest. We're going to take your calls. Tom, what would you like to be doing 10 years from now?
10 years from now, I'm definitely going to be working full-time for my nonprofit Integrity Research Institute. My wife and I are both aiming in that direction and saving up our money and also working to build up the Institute with many different marketing plans. And, of course, I keep writing books like I shouldn't.
Well, good for you. You know, we need more people like you out there pounding away at this.
Thank you.
You ready for the phones?
Okay.
West of the Rockies, Mike in San Jose, California. You're on with us. Hey, Mike.
George, how you doing?
Great, thanks.
Good. George, a question for your expert there. Over the weekend, I got, there was a Tesla coil. A guy had a Tesla coil with a copper pyramid at the top of it, and people would walk close to this thing, and the Tesla coil pyramid thing would arc off and hit people in the hands. He said, put your hands out, and you'll receive a shock from this. Well, I did this. It was really neat, but afterwards I went home, and I have a problem hearing, get ringing in the ears and stuff, and I was wondering, could this possibly improve your hearing? Because it seemed that afterwards I did this, a couple hours later, I could hear better. I could hear the television better. I didn't have to yell anymore because I felt like I had damaged hearing in the past, and I was just wondering if this could possibly affect improving your hearing.
Good question. What do you think, Tom?
Actually, I've heard anecdotal reports of improving vision, and that's from a number of sources. But hearing is something that's new as far as the report that this gentleman's describing. But to tell you the truth, when you're experiencing a flood of the high voltage potential and electrons, and of course you would contact with some piece of metal coming off of it, it definitely does provide a jolt to the transmembrane potential, so that all of a sudden you're going to get toxins moved that probably have not been moved in a while. Yeah.
Absolutely. It felt that way. And I was just wondering if it did, because there was a marketed improvement in my hearing, and I wish I could buy one of these things to get shocked all the time if that was the case.
Yeah, you can, and as I say, biocharger.net is one example, and 5machine.com is another. So they're coming onto the market, and I think hopefully the price will start coming down too.
Great, sir. Thank you very much, George. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mike. It is a wonder what this bioelectromagnetic healing might do in terms of the possibilities. Let me ask you the big question about the C question, Tom, if I can.
Sure.
Has it been used on people with cancer?
Yes, it has, and this is the sad story that is repeated and summarized in my book right in the very beginning as far as the history of this. Specifically, for example, in 1932, at the American Congress of Physical Therapy, Dr. Gustav Kolischer announced that Tesla's high-frequency electric currents are bringing about highly beneficial results in dealing with cancer, surpassing anything that could be accomplished with ordinary surgery. So this is 1932, and essentially the research that was done in the San Diego area at the University of San Diego also made it become mainstream as well, until the state of California Health Department conducted a hearing ordering the testing of Rice's device, for example, to be stopped, and it became a real confrontation because these things were so beneficial and successful.
Next up, first-time caller line, we've got Colin in Colorado Springs. Hi, Colin.
Hi, George. How you doing?
Great.
Dr. Vallone, I don't mean to be presumptuous, but I am from Colorado Springs, and we've all seen the movie The Prestige.
Yes.
I know. It's one of those things you got to either take to heart or just admire in its own entirety. And, well, the thing about it was the battle for electromagnetic currents in the turn of the century was either alternate or direct.
Yes.
And it seemed that the Edisonians seemed to want to disrupt. You know what? They got the car battery, and we got everything else.
That's a good point.
Isn't that true?
Very good, yes.
So here's the thing. If Nikola Tesla can transmit electricity through the atmosphere and bring it down to us as free energy, what are we, over the next 50 years, given the last 100 years of electromagnetical engineering ability? Here's the thing, okay? I originally went to school to be a physicist. I wanted to be an astronaut. I have a long-standing family history of electromagnetic engineering. Unfortunately, one of the products of that was the guided missile, which was not possible without a short and reproducible electrical current in a sustainable environment. Well, what are we to do if we have a long-standing electromagnetic current which not only feeds what we've been talking about tonight? What if it not only feeds these subcutaneous infiltrations, these Tesla jumps within our own personal neurons? What happens if they get out of control? I believe that if there's an electromagnetic field and we're all participating in it, what happens to our own personal identity within it?
Well, I can answer that from experience, and actually I do subscribe to the protection from electropollution. And in fact, there's a wonderful company called Less EMF that produces and sells metallized nylon fabric that you can use on your bed. And you can design your own Faraday cage, if you like, to sleep underneath and inside of an electroprotective environment. So really, the electropollution we're getting now from cell phones and from all kinds of radar waves, radio waves, TV and radio, and power line amounts to a really a cross area of what we have to call electropollution. And it's good to be able to, for example, go out into the country, which my wife and I did recently, where cell phone coverage wasn't even available. And we slept so well that night, it reminded me of the experience I had in a Faraday cage when I used to own one.
Good
so
point.
this is a valid question, but to attribute the Tesla wireless power as somehow being more powerful, which I think that's what you're implying. If we had a Wardenclyffe Tower or several of them broadcasting power line magnetic field or power level electromagnetic fields, would there be more electropollution? And the answer to that is actually no. In my book, Harnessing the Wheelwork of Nature, we actually have Jim Corum's analysis of that question, because he's been asked that many times. And the power density in watts per square centimeter is very low, extremely low, and much lower than most electropollution.
Ran into a guitarist this weekend who has got arthritis, and he's petrified that his livelihood is going to go down the tubes. Would any of this electromagnetic machinery and technology work on him?
Well, actually, yes. And I say that without being a medical doctor. I'm not making a medical claim, but from the anecdotal experience of people with joint pains, and both my wife and I do have these arthritic conditions. We're both in our 50s. And besides taking the nutrients, chondroitin, glucosamine, MSM, hyaluronic acid, those are four of the major ones that really help get the nutrients to the joints. And if you do exercises and weight-bearing exercise, specifically, your joints are like bones. They need the calcium transport. The electric fields, for example, the Premier Junior I was talking about, that device or any other small device that provides electron flow will break down the toxins that are normally stored in the joints. Many of us may not even know that the minerals we've ingested that are inorganic for all the years we've lived, oftentimes can't be processed or eliminated by the body. So there's natural chelation methods, there's other methods to detox, but if you haven't, the toxins are normally stored in the joints. So there is a theory that arthritis does have some contribution from various mineral deposits that do need to be cleared out.
Okay, let's go to our wild card line. Mary in Kansas City, Missouri. Hi, Mary.
Hello, George and Tom.
Sure
this
thing.
is Mary, yes. I'll get right to the point. Now, you were just talking about the arthritis. Now, I have rheumatoid arthritis. I've had it since I was 24. And because of the drugs they were trying to put me on, they said that I could get lymphoma cancer. Well, guess what? I said, I don't think so. So now I am not on any kind of drug, and I bear the pain every day. And I was wondering, Tom, what could I do with that magnetic? Would that help me? And if it would, how would I get a hold of whatever you suggest, and how much would it run?
Well, to answer your question in general, we really can describe the fact that, for example, if you're referring to the Premier Junior, that's something that is described and available on our website, integrityresearchinstitute.org, or you can call the 888 number. But the important thing is that this is an ailment that has a psychosomatic component to it.
Right.
Rheumatoid is different than osteo.
Osteo.
Yeah.
Right.
And my cousin has it too. So I've talked and experienced the pain that you're going through, and basically sympathized with you. So really, there are a lot of therapy methods that are like meditation, for example. I wrote a book on modern meditation as well, and I subscribe to that in helping the mind to heal the body, because many people don't know that autosuggestion and affirmation.
Mind over matter.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
But besides that, if you do have some electrotherapy and the right nutrients, and you're living a lifestyle that's not too stressful, you might even consider counseling too, because some of these emotional baggage issues oftentimes can create physical problems.
Well, that's true, but I'm like George. I've got grandkids, honey. Thank you.
Thank you, too.
I've got grandkids. I've got lots of them. I got 4 of them. Hey, if you put a shower filter on your shower, will that reduce, though, the pressure of the shower?
No.
It will not, okay.
No, we have one and it works just as well.
You get them at the home supply store, anything like that?
Yeah, and also the natural food stores. Mm-hmm.
Shower filter.
Yeah.
Charcoal, right?
That's right, activated charcoal.
Cuts down on the chlorine. I guess if you're in a hot shower and the door is closed, it's almost like a gas effect, isn't it?
It could be. Absolutely. And the water treatment facility in your local city will agree that you're getting chlorine out of it, but you're supposed to let the water sit for a little while so the chlorine gas can diffuse before you drink it. But in the shower, you really don't have a chance to let it sit for a while.
It's there. It bombards its way at you. Wild card line, Bob in Miami. Hi, Bob.
Hey, this is another example of why I've been listening to Coast since I was 12.
I love it.
Yeah, thanks, George.
Sure thing,
my
Bob.
question goes back to a little bit earlier in the program. And you had mentioned, George, that you wondered if the Illuminati was preventing some of these technologies from getting out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my question is this. Perhaps they couldn't make profits. Perhaps free energy is only free because of a money system, because of a system of value. Why is this being prevented if it, in essence, has the value becomes obsolete? Because if it's unlimited amounts of energy, if it's not scarce, then why is it not? Do you see what I'm going with this, George? Or
Sure do. And he's got a good question here, Tom, and that is, maybe they just can't make money with this.
That's right. Oh, that's absolutely true. And it's been that way even with vitamins. The FDA's try to stop vitamins every so often from being so readily available.
And they're not done with that yet either, are they?
That's a good analogy. A similar situation, and of course the people who have big businesses are suffering when they see a very effective treatment. Do you know, for example, ozone is classified as a drug by the FDA? I
did not know that.
I mean, and there's other natural therapies as well, phytonutrients and so forth. But this is really, I would agree with the caller that this is a major component of the issue. I mean, even when we heard the Iraq War from Wolfowitz he was quoted in the newspaper as saying this was just for the oil. And so we have big businesses directing a lot of our activities in our nation, which really, when you consider the taxpayers' concerns, really should also have equal time.
Has the FDA approved any of these bioelectromagnetic devices?
Yes. And in fact, one of the best examples I can cite, which also I had a conversation today concerning, is the fact that in the 1980s, my good friend Dr. Becker and Bassett and Pilla, the three of them together invented the bone treatment electrotherapy device. And it's a specific type of pulse, 16 hertz, and it helps knit bones, but it also helps really cure osteoporosis. This is one of the major ways that you can stress the bones without forcing older people to do weightlifting. And so it was a big boom. In fact, the magazines actually had articles, which I kept at the time, because I was in that field, talking about how many doctors were applying for FDA approval for that, and that specific bone treatment electro device. Well, here 20 years later, the person on the street with osteoporosis has no idea where to get that type of device, or even if it's available anymore. Unfortunately, the doctors never made a business out of it so that it became available to the people on the street. And that is an issue. You know, FDA approval doesn't guarantee that the product will sustain itself for years to come.
If a guy, Tom, bought this device and set up a shop and just started treating people, not making claims, but treating people, I bet they'd shut him down.
Well, I can tell you stories of people who've done that, and certainly it's lucky and fortunate that they have found medical doctors to come to their aid. And my good friend Guy Obolensky, for example, I really revere him. He's one of a kind. He's used a high-voltage Tesla coil for years to treat people with all kinds of terminal diseases. And he's had medical doctors help and advise him and send him terminal patients as well. So luckily he hasn't made any claims. He's had a low profile, no website, no phone number that is posted anywhere, and there's many others that have to do that type of stealth marketing in order to survive.
What's really the difference in results between the electromagnetic technology and the light technology?
Well, the electro technology is, I would say, perhaps more powerful. If we can compare the two just in terms of intensity.
Okay.
Because you can penetrate the entire body with high voltage or magnetic fields or both. And when you're sitting, say, right near a Tesla coil, and that's what I try to focus on through much of the book, is to give you examples of how and why the body would respond to this. The Tesla coil spectrum, which I have in the back of the book, actually contains kilohertz, megahertz, and gigahertz. I mean, this is a broad-based, broadband bath that the person is. It's like a frequency bath. Not only is it high voltage and electrons. See, many people may not know that the free radical damage has been connected to mitochondrial damage and aging. And so the quenching of free radicals alone tends to be a great boost to the immune system and to the lack of aging, because you're getting rid of those free radicals that are constantly destroying our DNA and our tissues.
All right, we'll be back with final questions with Dr. Tom Vallone right here on Coast to Coast AM. I'm George Norrie. Well, get ready for our next Coast to Coast program. We're going behind the secret door. A number of guests popping in every half hour. Who they are, only a producer knows, not even me. That's our next Coast to Coast show. Okay, welcome back to Coast, Dr. Tom Vallone, our final segment here. Let's go right back to the calls. West of the Rockies, you're on the air with us. Hi there.
Is that me?
Yeah, I think it might be.
Okay. Good morning, gentlemen. I have a specific question, but in the meantime, my partner is furiously looking for a paper of Tesla's that we came across almost 20 years ago, and he talked about healing just about anything, including cancer. You know, so anyway, he's looking for that. And I wanted to ask about a TENS unit. Is there any benefit We have an old TENS unit that we got years ago, and is there any benefit to doing anything with it?
Yes, actually there is, and I'm glad you mentioned that because as George asked for examples that have FDA approval, TENS units are another excellent category of devices that do have FDA approval and can be used really for the pain cessation and have been proven to work for that purpose.
Oh, great. Like right now our dog has a problem with his leg. He hurt it, and, he just keeps, he doesn't really keep injuring it, but he keeps getting it sore by, because we have hard floors. And would we have to shave hair off of his leg or anything to actually get some kind of benefit from that?
Well, it depends on what type of electrodes you have on the unit. For the listeners who don't know what we're talking about, it's a transcutaneous electromagnetic stimulator, and a TENS is the acronym. So if you can't make contact very well, then yes, you probably could really benefit by shaving it.
Great. And, George, I wanted to say, when you say, I did not know that, you always remind me of Johnny Carson.
That's true.
That's right.
I didn't know that either. All right, thanks.
That's much
all right. First-time caller line, you're on the air with us. Hi there.
Hello, Doctor. Hello, George. This is John in Dallas, and I would like to apologize in advance because I'm going to sound a little bit skeptical, and I'm sure I don't have much time, so I'd like to get right to it.
All right, and no need to apologize, John.
I've heard a lot of jargon and a lot of anecdotal evidence and about this doctor was in a magazine 20 years ago and this and that, but I haven't heard anything concrete. I mean, first of all, what exactly is a doctor of engineering physics? I mean, I know that you can get a degree in science or art in engineering or physics. What is engineering physics?
Well, if that is your question, it basically can be answered simply. Engineering physics combines both fields. I did undergraduate. Let me answer the question for you, sir. Undergraduate, I actually specialized and got 2 degrees. A double degree. It took me 5 years instead of 4, one in electrical engineering and one in physics. And then in grad school, I spent a few years in each department pursuing 2 masters. I actually was advised just to stick with one and go for the PhD. And then basically I also had over 70 credit hours in both fields.
So you got a bachelor in
electrical and a bachelor in physics.
You got a bachelor in electrical engineering?
That's right, from State University of New York at Buffalo.
And then you got a bachelor in physics.
As well, yeah. And then there literally is a department called engineering physics in the electrical engineering department at most universities. And they specifically do engineering that's oftentimes for the Defense Department, and it requires lots of physics knowledge, like dealing with high currents, which I did.
So that would be through the SUNY system, State University of New York? Because, I mean, right now I'm in University of Texas system, and I don't know of any engineering physics program, but I believe you if you say that. That's fine. I mean, all that coursework that you did, that's fine. But, I mean, a lot of the things that I'm hearing you say is basically just jargon and statistics and anecdotal evidence. I haven't heard anything concrete, anything even empirical, never mind rigorous, to back up anything that you've said. I mean, it's all just this guy may have been, this guy was in a magazine. I mean, I don't hear anything about anything peer-reviewed, any journal articles, any...
well, let me answer that question before you keep rambling on about that.
I'm not rambling. It's a question.
Okay, then let me answer the question. I've written about 10 books. 6 of them are what we tried to discuss tonight, but in each of the books, I specifically focus on journal articles for references. People even complain when they read my work that I have too many references, too many journal articles.
Yeah,
but
I mean, I can attest they're in the back of his book.
Thank you, George.
They're all over the place.
Usually about 100 references. I usually do 100 or 200 references of peer-reviewed journals for each of the topics I've written books about.
Okay, well, I mean...
Please visit the website. And
they're there. And one of the reasons why we don't talk a lot about references is because It's boring.
There you go. Yeah, the references are there, so let's go on to the next question.
Let's go to our wild card line. You're on the air with us on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Hello, can you hear me all right?
Loud and clear.
This is Louise. I'm an inventor. I have many inventions, and I've even invented a way to help paraplegics get back enough function, either to walk or at least it'll help them live a lot longer and get better circulation. And I've been stalled in the patent office. I've never patented anything. The patent office has tried to stonewall me on everything. So I've drafted legislation to help people get patents by making these patents available to everybody. And patent pending is no way for me. I'm not going to do patent pending. I'm not going to borrow money from anybody who asks me questions about my inventions. In other words, I'm not going to let anybody into my business.
And what is your question?
And what have you invented?
Oh, well, many ways to generate electricity and get them to people, and then this other thing I've told you about, things of that nature.
Like free energy?
Almost free.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of almost free?
Almost free.
Yes.
Yeah, it's been a long time, though.
Well, there's no capital investment, so that makes it almost free. You have to spend a little money to get it working. Buy the unit first.
Yeah, Dr. Vallone, what I need is I need you to listen to what I have to say and see if you know of any way to make it happen. This new law that I have drafted is about a half a page, 100 words, and it simply says that, first of all, applicants are not required to submit drawings. They may use photographs of what they have built, or they may even bring it in and show it to the patent office.
Sure. You can do that even today.
But they wouldn't let me. They said I had to have a drawing.
Well, that oftentimes is encouraged, but you're not required to have a drawing. And so really a patent attorney can help you in that regard. And that's usually the standard advice to follow. But go ahead and send me an email, because it sounds like it's an involved...
The rest of it is that they have to allow patent applicants to file for a patent, not patent pending. They have to let... On this new legislation I've written, they have to allow everybody to file for a patent. And if somebody doesn't have the money, they can pay later. And if they do have the money, they can pay now. And then they can pay according to how much money they make. So if I make $1 billion on mine, they can charge me $1 million instead of the $500 that they were wanting.
What's your email, Tom, for people?
It's iri@starpower.net.
One more time.
iri@starpower.net.
Simple enough. Let's go back to the phones. We'll go to our first-time caller line. Hey, Brian, you're on the air with us.
Yes, hello. How are you this evening?
Good, Brian. Thanks.
I wanted to ask the host if he was aware of two research scientists, I believe it was maybe 2.5 years ago, that had developed an instrument that would deliver a low-voltage current, DC, through the body via two IV needles, positive and then negative, that would return back to the device. And the purpose of the device was to literally kill the AIDS virus that was in the body's system. They're supposed to have had excellent results with it, and now the device has vanished off the market, but there's supposed to still be a patent for the device that exists. And I didn't know if the host was aware of this or not, or had heard anything about it.
Well, the host isn't, but how about the guest?
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I'm flipping through the appendix to the book.
And it's not unusual for the host not to know about it.
Okay.
The answer is yes. And in my book, Bioelectromagnetic Healing, in the back on page 75, is a short article called Electrocuting the AIDS Virus. And it specifically describes the Kali patent, that's Kaali. And it really is a fascinating story, because Bob Beck was the one who contacted Dr. Kali and complained. He was at the Einstein College of Medicine, and complained that, you've invented a great device to kill the AIDS virus in blood. And that's what it was designed for storage
Sure.
of blood. And he says, but you've got a cure for AIDS. And he says, Dr. Colley responded to Bob Beck saying, well, we don't have funding for that application.
Oh, you got to be kidding.
That's a true story. So I've reprinted 4 pages on this device that the caller is referred to, and the company that now reproduces the Colley patent application that Bob Beck designed to be a low-cost implementation of this patented usage. And it's a silver pulsar and a magnetic pulsar, but the Soda company, SOTA, is the one that sells it, and they're sodainstruments.com.
Okay, next up, let's go to our West of the Rockies line. Lori, you're on the air with us. Hi, Lori.
Hi. Hi, doctor. I just got diagnosed with degenerative bone disease, and I watched a show on Bio Channel, and they were talking about like the ultraviolet, and it kills the bacteria, and then I was wondering about the infrared also for pain, and do the products that they have out, do you believe that the infrared is actually helping with the pain, like the products they sell in the massagers or anything like that have the infrared?
Well, and that's one of the things I'm testing right now.
On the infrared?
Yeah. I'll let you know in a couple weeks how it works.
Can I be a guinea pig?
Well, I'm being one myself, so I'll let you know what happens.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and actually, to tell you the truth, from my own experience, infrared is very helpful, but I also, as I said before, advise the pulsed infrared instead of the constant, like the heat lamp, the old style heat lamp that all our parents use.
Yeah, this does pulse. This one blinks.
There you go.
Okay, that's what I was wondering about, because the one I have doesn't really pulse.
Why do you like the blink, Tom?
Well, and really the reasons in the book, the pulsed effect is really the way the cells cannot react and get defensive, and plus the gradient. It's really an electric gradient you're creating by having this pulsing, whether it's in the terahertz like we're talking about, infrared, or in the kilohertz and gigahertz. But let me mention that there's some expensive ones out there, but there's a company called lightrelief.com, and they sell it for like $75, and it's an excellent device. I keep one next to my bed, and it has a timed timer on it, plus it gives you 4 different choices of the pulse rate. And it includes infrared LEDs and various light LEDs.
Let's go to our wild card line. You're on the air with us. Hi there.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yes. I have a question. What is 0 point energy? I mean, I've heard it mentioned on the show before, but like there was a chiropractor on once. He used it to heal people, but I don't know. What is it?
What's your definition of it, Thomas?
Glad you asked. The 0 point energy is the energy that exists after you get rid of any thermal energy or any electromagnetic energy, any other type. And it's available everywhere. It's really the quantum vacuum that permeates all of existence, including our own atoms. One of the interesting things is the electron stays away from the nucleus, even though it's electrostatically attracted to it because of 0 point energy. And so it's a very interesting type of non-thermal agitation, or noise, they call it. And I have a whole chapter describing how it's being measured in semiconductors, and there's a diode method that can be used to rectify it and produce electricity from it.
Tom, lately we've been seeing lights all over the country. Indiana, Florida, Stephenville, Ohio, all over the place. Could this be the craft we're talking about tonight that we, under a black ops program, have, or might it be extraterrestrial?
Most of the fellows you talk to who have been in that field for years, the black ops or close to it with top secret clearance, will tell you that over 50% of the lights and the unusual aircraft we see are ones that are owned by our own country.
Well, that means the other 50%.
We don't know. Could be 10 or 20 that's ET, but a good majority is definitely ours. And we've had over half a century to perfect them.
First-time caller line, you're up with us. Hello there.
Hi, am I on?
Hi, V, right?
Yes. Good evening. I was interested in finding out if you are aware of a machine that was around for quite a while. I haven't been able to locate it recently, and it's used for people with Lyme disease, and it supposedly kills spirochetes, and it's an electromagnetic type of machine. Would you be aware of anything like that, or does your book tell us anything about things like...
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
good.
And in fact, the book is filled with journal references that specifically describe various bacterial, leukemia cells, viruses, and so forth being killed in specific studies. I even have on page 90 a table that describes the various field effects and the results from them. In other words, magnetic and electric fields. So, there's so many that have that application. Perhaps just if you Google Lyme disease, you probably will find a few companies that already have studies that relate to that. But my book actually goes into the bacterial and viral applications, which I don't believe specifically list Lyme disease, but there are plenty of others.
Where's your next speaking engagement, Tom, like the X Conference?
I'll be at the World Future Society in July, and also the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, which is also in July.
Okay, you're going to be at any other conferences that I might pop up? I'm going to one in San Jose, one in Chicago, so I'll be all over the place myself.
Yeah, I was in Santa Fe just a few weeks ago at the Science and Consciousness Conference, but after the X Conference, I'm hoping that I don't have too many more in the fall as well, but I'm sure I will.
Well, it was good to meet you at the X Conference, and I told you we'd do a show with you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
And here we are. Give out your website, that toll-free number, one more time.
Okay, it's integrityresearchinstitute.org, and the standard 800 number is 295-7674, and that goes to an answering machine. But the phone that we've had for orders is the 888-802-5243.
All right, thank you. Dr. Thomas Vallone. For Karis Coburn, Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladesseur, Ross Mitchell, Ian Punnett, and Art Bell, I'm George Norrie. Somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM, I'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone.